Shtapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So rather than just speak about one particular Vaishnavacharya, I wanted today to be about the glories of association in general, the glories of wonderful sanghas, and how our devotional lives kind of hinge and they really, really rely on those different sanghas and that kind of association that uplifts us, keeps us going, keeps us keyed in, keeps us locked into our Krishna consciousness, keeps us honest. So today is going to be all about that Vaishnava association. And I thought I would start with a small passage from Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And I know we spoke about Brihad Bhagavatamrita just a little bit when we spoke about examining our lives sincerely, really thinking about Parikshit Maharaj and what it meant for him to examine his entire life sincerely, to think about, okay, I have 7 days left. What is it that I need? Right? When we come face to face with all of those ideas about death and that transition into the next plane of existence, we start thinking about what is actually necessary, right? Loads of people do a cleanse and a purge, and they get rid of all the things. They try and declutter. So in the process of decluttering life, Parikshit Maharaj, he hands over his kingdom to the next in line. He gives away all of his princely, kingly attire. But what does he think is absolutely necessary for him at that moment is Sangha, association. And so he goes seeking someone who can tell him what the best course of action would be for him now that he's got just 7 days left. So what is important to him? It's not the money, it's not the riches, it's not the clothes, it's not the carriages or the fancy cars for us nowadays. It's not any of those things except for association. And when he is being spoken to in this great assemblage of sages in Naimisharanya, we have Shukadev Goswami, but we also have countless other sages who come from far and wide just to be a part of this Sangha, just to be able to also hear from Shukadev Goswami, to be able to be in this association where someone is going to listen actively and then ask those pertinent questions that are actually burning within everyone's hearts. So this is the glory of being together, right? You get the idea and the concrete concept that we are not alone. There is someone usually ready and willing to ask the very same question that's been burning within your heart. You get to hear about those topics that give you life in your devotional service. So Parikshit Maharaj, after hearing from Shukadev Goswami, now he's getting close to this end period, right? The final countdown. And his mother asks him, okay, tell me the essence of what you've learned. This is Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which I was saying, there are 12 cantos of Bhagavatam, and you'd think there are so many lessons in there, and he would just repeat them verbatim. But no, he gives an interpretation on all of the wonderful teachings that Shukadev Goswami has left him with. And he now relates that to his mother in a series of stories. So at the beginning of this series of stories, we hear that once a group of exalted sages were at Prayag, the best of pilgrimage sites, during the month of Magh. which will be arriving just after the full moon, which occurs on Monday. The sages had taken their bath and were happily seated before the deity of Sri Madhava, feeling satisfied, as if all their goals in life had been fulfilled. They were praising one another, saying, "You are the recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy." And thanks to Srila Sanatana Goswami, we have a wonderful commentary. These sages at Prayag were humble devotees of Krishna. Each of them disliked hearing himself praised and was thus trying to divert the praise to someone else. Appreciative of one another's good qualities, they could honestly tell one another, "You are the Lord's dearmost devotees." When Vaishnavas are friendly to one another like this, their community prospers. Prayag is called Tirtha Murdanya, the chief of holy places, because it is located at the confluence of the rivers Ganga and Jamuna. The sages were there at the most auspicious time for bathing, the month of Magh, January-February. As Dattatreya, the incarnation of the personality of Godhead, has explained, the Supreme Lord Madhava is not as pleased by vows, charity, or austere penances as by one simply taking a bath in the month of Magh. Sri Madhava is the presiding deity of Prayag Tirtha. After bathing, the sages were sitting in front of Lord Madhava, feeling extremely fortunate to be together in such a sacred place at such a time. That one particular verse and commentary really sums up for me what Sangha is. We might think that we are trapped in New York or anywhere else in the world, but really, we've come to a confluence of sacred spaces, right? All of these sacred spaces have formed together and they've met at this one juncture on the internet. And now this is a holy place of pilgrimage. Each of these places where we reside can become holy places of pilgrimage. Any place where Srila Prabhupada has established the chanting of the holy name can become a holy place of pilgrimage. And so what does it mean for us to bathe in these sacred places during these auspicious times? For us, it might not be a physical bath, but we can definitely bathe our intellect. Right? Is it either Thoreau or Emerson, which is attributed to saying that they wake up in the morning and they bathe their intellect in the philosophies of Bhagavad Gita. This is us. We should be taking full advantage of these gatherings, feeling so fortunate to be with one another at such a fortunate, auspicious time. We get up in the morning, and for a lot of us in the Northern Hemisphere with this wintry vibes, it's kind of just before sunrise, which we hear is always incredibly auspicious. We have these energies swirling around. We have the universe, the whole universe is just kind of like stirring and waking up. And not only that, but our Krishna is very partial toward these early morning periods. When we think about coming together at Mangal Arti, it can seem arduous. It can seem a little bit intense. There's this 4:30, 5 o'clock a.m. period. And actually, so many faiths have this ceremony or a sort of ritual of waking up in the pre-dawn hours in order to immerse oneself in prayer. And we can hear all of the reasons about why that is. You know, it's good for the mind. Everything is very quiet. There are less disturbances. You can really, really begin to hear what's happening from within the soul, right? How our Paramatma, how our super soul is calling to us and speaking to us. But there are also sweeter reasons. I kind of always wind up looking for the sweeter reasons that may not rely just on me. Mangal Arti is considered one of the most auspicious times to ask the Lord for a benediction. Some say, and when I was growing up, I would ask this question, okay, why? Some say it's because at Mangal Arti, the first thing that we give Krishna when he wakes up is sweets. They wake up the deities in the morning. They give him a plate filled with bowls filled with sugar. That always seemed very interesting to me. Most people, if they're health conscious, they don't think like, okay, first thing to do in the morning for a nice balanced Ayurvedic way of living, have a whole entire bowl of sugar cooked down with milk and ghee and all kinds of things, like, load up. But this is what we do with Krishna. So some people say that it is auspicious to ask for a benediction at that time because he's feeling particularly sweet. He's feeling quite happy and energized. Who wouldn't be? And usually most of us, like, those are coveted Mongol sweets. You go anywhere in the world to any temple, and when they really, really like you, they find you later on. These are Mongol Arti sweets. And you think, oh, this is a big deal. But is that the only reason? I found possibly an equally sweet, if not sweeter reason. Mongol Arti is one of those most auspicious times for devotees to gather together and to associate with each other and to associate with Sri Krishna because of what it represents within Krishna's own pastimes. What is Krishna doing at that time? So Krishna usually goes to sleep somewhere between 8:30 and 10:30. He goes to sleep in his room within the palace of Nanda Bhavan, and Yashoda Maya makes sure that he's tucked in nicely and that he's heard whatever stories he is demanded to hear. And his eyes flutter closed, and sometimes they say Krishna pretends to be asleep while the gopis pretend not to notice that he's not really sleeping. And they continue telling stories and milling around until they're sure that he's asleep, and then they leave. Krishna sleeps for about 24 minutes. And then he wakes up, looks around, makes sure that the coast is clear, and then they say that he climbs out of his window to an adjacent tree, climbs down that tree, and then skips off into the forest to play his flute and await for many, many gopis. The gopis then have incredible nighttime pastimes. They sing, they dance, they have water sports. Krishna terrorizes them lovingly. They have wonderful, wonderful pastimes. And then somewhere just pre-dawn, they all fall asleep. And then just before the first rays of light hit the sky, just when it's just darkest, and then we get that saying, it's just darkest before the dawn, but just when it's just darkest, Vrinda Devi wakes up. And she thinks, well, we've got to fix this entire situation. Krishna can't stay here. Right? Radharani can't stay here. They've got to go back to their respective homes. And then she employs the very many forest creatures that are in her arsenal in order to wake up this divine couple. And so she employs parrots. Sometimes she uses other birds. Sometimes when they're feeling incredibly stubborn and they refuse to wake up, she employs an old monkey. And I think they said this old female monkey is able to screech so annoyingly that it is able to finally awaken the divine couple. This is why Mangalarti is so auspicious. Yes, Krishna is given sweets. Yes, it's a wonderful time for prayer, but really, he's in such a good mood because he has not yet left the company of these gopis. It's after Mangalarti that he goes home, after he's awakened, and they all tell him, go home. He goes home and goes back to sleep in his own bed, only to be awakened just a few hours later by Mother Jashoda. But none of this would have happened without Sangha. In fact, we wouldn't have known any of this without a Sangha of people, without an assembly of people to tell us about this wonderful fruit. So these are the glories of association. Srila Prabhupada says in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. Purport. The faithless cannot accomplish this process of devotional service that is the purport of this verse. Faith is created by association with devotees. Unfortunate people even after hearing all the evidence of Vedic literature from great personalities, still have no faith in God. They are hesitant and cannot stay fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Thus, faith is a most important factor for progress in Krishna consciousness. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that faith is the complete conviction that simply by serving the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, one can achieve all perfection. That is called real faith, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 31, Text 14. By giving water to the root of a tree, one satisfies its branches, twigs, and leaves, and by supplying food to the stomach, one satisfies all the senses of the body. Similarly, by engaging in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, one automatically satisfies all the demigods and all other living entities. Therefore, after reading Bhagavad Gita, one should promptly come to the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. One should give up all other engagements and adopt the service of the Supreme Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. If one is convinced of this philosophy of life, that is faith. Now, the development of faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. There are 3 divisions of Krishna conscious men. In the 3rd class are those who have no faith. Even if they are officially engaged in devotional service, they cannot achieve the highest perfectional stage. Most probably they will slip after some time. They may become engaged, but because they haven't complete conviction and faith, it is very difficult for them to continue in Krishna consciousness. We have practical experience in discharging our missionary activity that some people come and apply themselves to Krishna consciousness with some hidden motive. And as soon as they are economically a little well situated, they give up this process and take to their old ways again. It is only by faith that one can advance in Krishna consciousness. As far as the development of faith is concerned, one who is well versed in the literatures of devotional service and has attained the stage of firm faith is called a first-class person in Krishna consciousness. So then Srila Prabhupada speaks about first-class faith, second-class faith, and third-class faith. And these people who have the best faith are the ones who have the best association. We see practical experience all throughout Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. The associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, many of them had their lives completely changed, and many of them were accepted by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the basis of that faith that came by good association. We have heard of the story of Devananda Pandit. Devananda Pandit would constantly preach from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a Bhagavatam scholar. And yet, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered his presence an annoyance. He found himself irritated by Devananda Pandit's very existence. So much so that he would actively run away from the place where Devananda Pandit was preaching, or from where Devananda Pandit was. And we've given a lecture on Devananda Pandit, and I just remember thinking, imagine the most munificent, compassionate, magnanimous Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who accepted everyone, found Devananda Pandit annoying. And not just annoying, so much annoying that he refused to want to be around him. Saying, imagine the soul of all souls, the very soul of the Paramatma, the source of all super souls within every heart. What would someone have to do to distance themselves from that personality? Devananda Pandit would preach from Srimad Bhagavatam, but he would never include bhakti. He would never preach on devotional service. He would never preach on the glories of devotion to Krishna. And this was the thorn in the side of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that most magnanimous of personalities, the person who came to give this magnanimous, compassionate, devotional service and love to everybody, to inundate the world with a flood of prema. But he would actively avoid him because he did not preach the glories of devotional service. Also, Devananda Pandit had had students. And as he was preaching the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, one day, in walks Srivas Pandit. Srivas Pandit was so eager to hear about the glories of Sri Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam that he walked into that assembly and he sat down. And it didn't matter what Devananda Pandit said. Srivas would hear the wonderful glories of Sri Krishna, and he would envision those glories of Sri Krishna and the pastimes of Sri Krishna playing out within Sri Vrindavan Dham, and Srivas Pandit was enveloped in a mood of ecstasy. He would cry, he would shake, he would have goosebumps, he would chatter, and everybody else thought that he was a disturbance. They began to talk about him badly. They began to say, how is anybody supposed to seriously study academically in a scholarly mood with this emotional person blubbering about? And at one point, they all gathered together. They physically picked up Srivas and they removed him from the assembly, put him on the side of the road. Srivas came back to external consciousness and he thought, oh no, how did I get here? And then he would think, I hope I haven't offended anyone too much. And then he'd kind of walk home. Srivas didn't take any offense, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead did. And because Devananda Pandit did not stop his associates, he was considered just as big an offender. It is often said that the teacher is also responsible for the activities and the character of the disciples. And so if they see their disciples behaving in such a way, it is their duty to prevent that activity. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he defeated that Digvijay Pandit, which we've spoken about, right? The Digvijay Pandit, Keshav Kashmiri, he was so attached to his mode of preaching. He was so attached to his name as Digvijay Pandit and his title, that as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu defeated his lines of philosophy, he understood this is a fate worse than death for this Digvijay Pandit. And as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu defeated him, and all of his disciples began to deride him and make derisive comments, Mahaprabhu stopped them. Stop. This is not what we are meant for. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this is not just something that he expects other people to live by, and he doesn't actually adopt those codes himself. These rules of propriety and etiquette, he was an emblem, an exemplar of all of them. And so he was so compassionate that he wanted to make sure that even the people he defeated did not feel anything but compassion and love emanating from him. This is what Devananda Pandit lacked. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at some point, he even confronted him. You impudent fellow, what do you think you've learned by studying Srimad Bhagavatam? He refused to be in his presence at all. I refuse to associate myself with you at all. One would think someone is completely lost. Devananda Pandit had a saving grace. Association. He somehow met up with Vakreshwar Pandit, who was a great dancer in the kirtans of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and a great chanter of Harinam Sankirtan. And so when Vakreshwar Pandit would chant, somehow or other, Devananda Pandit became entranced. And he would take a stick and he would try and make sure everyone stayed back, not to disturb the dancing of Vakreshwar Pandit and the kirtan of Vakreshwar. They began to have each other's association. Devananda Pandit couldn't figure out what it was, but there was something about this Vakreshwar Pandit that called to his very soul. And they became fast friends. And Devananda Pandit tried to keep them as friends, just serving however he could. Finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after many tours and many years, he comes back to Navadvip. He comes back and he decides, I will forgive anyone who has ever committed any offenses that I've considered offenses. This will become the place of amnesty. And so he comes back and he begins speaking with so many devotees. They're coming in droves, in the thousands. They are using this opportunity. And devotee after devotee after devotee is coming, and Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat describes how so many devotees would come and they say, oh, Mahaprabhu, please give me your shelter. Please give me your mercy. I've been a great offender at the lotus feet of all of these Vaishnavas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say, offending a Vaishnav is like drinking poison. But The antidote for poison is if you, with the same amount that you've drunk the poison, if you can take the antidote, then you'll be saved. This analogy, this metaphor for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we'd say, offending a Vaishnav is like drinking poison, but with the same amount, if you then go and glorify those Vaishnavas, that can be the only antidote. And for those devotees who would then make that switch and honestly, sincerely, with a full heart, glorify the Vaishnavas around them, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so much more than compassionate, ready and willing to accept all of those Vaishnavas, ready and willing to give them all protection, give them all of his mercy, and give them complete love of God. All it took was that one moment. That's it. So here we see the power of association. In this very place, in comes Devananda Pandit. He says, "Oh Mahaprabhu, I have done the most heinous deeds. I have preached Srimad Bhagavatam and never mentioned Krishna, never mentioned devotional service. I haven't given any importance to this devotional service, and thus I have distanced myself from you and your mercy. Is there any way that I can ever be forgiven?" Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not at all interested in forgiving him until he says, "Of course I will. You have become a candidate for the mercy of Sri Krishna, but not because of your preaching Srimad Bhagavatam, but because of your association with Vakreshwar Pandit. This has turned your entire life around." Srila Prabhupada says this faith comes from association. And that faith is the cornerstone and the basis and the foundation of our entire spiritual lives. There is no way we can continue in our devotional lives without that faith. And there's no way that we can continue with that faith without association. It is a synergistic compound that is necessary to our lives. So I pay my obeisances to this grand association, which is keeping us all alive, which is keeping us all going in our devotional service, or in our paths to try and even get to devotional service. We might think, I've got no devotional service whatsoever, but I know someone who does. And if I can just help them, you're already on the best pathway towards Krishna's mercy and toward achieving that mercy. These sages at Prayag were telling one another, you are undoubtedly the greatest recipient of Sri Krishna's mercy. And what all did that take? They didn't have to go and perform incredible austerities and stand on one leg with their hands outstretched for millions of years. All they had to do was come together in wonderful association at the right time, in the right place. And so Sri Krishna says that his devotees, they perform devotional service by gathering together and enlightening one another, enlivening one another by hearing about him. Sachinandan Maharaj says that we should value association in such a way that we come together and we talk about things, we hear about things that we can't hear about anywhere else. Meaning, you ever feel like, devotees just get you. Right? And this happens a lot. You can be a spiritual person and then you're looking for somebody in a relationship and they could understand everything else about you, but somehow they just don't get the spiritual thing. Like, what's the obsession with the spiritual stuff? And that can be the make it or break it in the whole relationship. And so you find yourself thinking, you're like, well, I'm going to need somebody who's going to understand my obsession with the spiritual stuff. Because so much comes from this association. I was speaking with friends all last week and they were saying, association is so interesting that you can find yourself, you think, I don't necessarily like who I am when I'm around this group of people. Or I don't like who I am around that group of people. And sometimes that group of people, they're just all the layers of our minds, right? Like somehow it's like, I don't even like who I am around this group of people going on here. What's our saving grace? Our saving grace is coming together with our friends, talking about the things that we can't talk about anywhere else. Talking about the issues and the hurdles and the victories and the triumphs that we can't talk about anywhere else. Talking about the fact that, okay, you know what, friends? We're going to embark on an Ekadasi fast and no one will really understand the victory or the trials or whatever it is except for other devotees. Even if you're gluten-free, sometimes they just don't understand. Right? They don't understand what goes into that with a mindset of prayer and an intention of, I'm coming to try and adopt this diet for this day, this fast for this day, in order to please my supreme friend. We want to come together and bathe our intellect, bathe our souls, bathe our hearts in those glories of the people who can tell us Krishna's your best friend. And I'll tell you why. Right? Those people who can uplift us in those moments where it's like, well, they didn't even know what I was going through, but somehow or other they completely understood and they said exactly what I needed to hear in those moments. These are the glories of good association. This is what we find in the association of those souls who seem to just magically understand us. Is it magic? No, it's Paramatma connecting us, speaking through all of those other devotees. So I offer my biggest obeisances and my respects to this Sangha, which is like a confluence of holy rivers, all of our minds and hearts coming together. And I feel so fortunate to be in this place at this time, together with all of you. So now I want to open it up for questions, comments, blessings that you'd like to shower upon me on this auspicious day.
You, Acyuta Gopi. I really like the point how an old female parrot can screech very annoyingly and awaken the divine couple. And I was thinking, yeah, this is me. I can screech. I can't do much, but I can do is screech and maybe get Krishna to awaken me. Yeah, thank you for that analogy. And I also liked how you said that faith is created by association of the devotees. I can sense that every morning in this class. My faith is being created. And also offending a devotee is like poison, and then take the antidote with that same mouth. Start glorifying them. That's the antidote. I really like those points. Just wanted to reflect them quickly. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. You're amazing. How wonderful is Krishna?
Thank you.
I was thinking, in the Bible, it says, faith is the assured expectation of the things yet unseen. And when we carry faith with us, works without faith is dead, the Bible says. So that's the association. Our association with devotees. That's how we should.
Faith without works. You're saying works without faith.
Oh, faith without works is dead. Sorry. That's correct. Thank you. So I have issues. I know. I think we all do. My mind just keeps racing and racing and racing and racing. And I call Adi like 3 a.m. sometimes. I wake up 23 other people, and he takes the time to talk to me. He's a blessing for me. He's a blessing. I met him in 2004.
You share with other people too.
What do you mean?
The two.
All right. So I'm gonna make it quick. Because he says I have the gift of gab, so I have to be careful. But I enjoyed this class very much. Thank you. Haribo.
Let me say something more.
Sure.
Mataji, Prabhupada tells us we get the quality of association we ask for. If we look for third class people, then we become fourth class. But if we really want first class association, specifically say, Lord, I want to be with those people that are close to Krishna and intense and dedicated and pure and repeating Prabhupada and setting a good example, then we'll be uplifted like that and we become like who we associate with. Right? So if we want good association, we'll get it. And if we want association that, we'll just ho-hum, casual, then we become like that also. So we have to be real careful what we desire.
Isn't it? And that it really makes you rethink life. Every time you turn on a TV or a radio or a podcast, to think, okay, whose association am I entering into right now? What association am I actually letting into my space right now? Like, am I gonna let a whole bunch of mobsters into my house? Is that what I really want? It really makes us like rethink, okay, what am I doing with my valuable time?
Devotee, one devotee in the Bhakti Center, he was saying, on your cell phone, you might record something, and then if you want, you can delete it. But we've got so much garbage
Yeah.
in the mind, and it's not easy to delete that stuff. So we don't want any more garbage in there. You be very careful what we look at, who we hear from, and who we look up to, and who we allow to speak into our life. There's a caution there, that this polluted association is also available if we're not careful. I think Bhima wants to say something there.
Adi just put me on the spot. I don't want to say anything. I just want to listen. I got a bucket of water here. Yes. Hare Krishna. Acyuta Gopi, wonderful, wonderful class. I'm just amazed. I can't wait to take birth again and head into to be someone like you yourself. So Hare Krishna. I'm off to work. I go.
See, I'm always amazed with Bhima Prabhu. Like that's, Srila Prabhupada said our definition of samadhi is to follow like Mother Yashoda. She was always busy for Krishna. And that this is the epitome. Like we get to see it in live action. What is samadhi for Kali Yuga folk like us is to be busy. Is to try and serve Krishna's devotees, whether they be people jivas or animal jivas or both. I love it.
I once heard an interview of a person who earns his livelihood by stealing, by taking from people, something that does not belong to him. And he was asked, but what about all the surveillance cameras that are everywhere these days? How do you work around those? And he said, he was asked, this technology is so advanced these days. How do you get away with it? How do you work around it? And he said, yeah, the technology is advanced, but people who are running it are clowns. So I was thinking, our mind and intellect, it's very advanced technology. So let's not let any clown run it by landing it to news channels or, all this Prajalpa podcast, like you said. So let's not let clowns run our advanced technology that is meant to be engaged in service of Krishna, like Bhima Prabhu is always engaged in serving, engaging his horses in service of the Lord. Amazing.
And we have to try and use our discrimination. We have to use some discernment and the good sense that hopefully God gave us. And Srila Prabhupada says, if you don't have common sense, ask someone who does. But like Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he used to say the first thing he would do when he got to a new place was get the newspaper and look at the news. And not because he was eager to find out all of the political happenings, but because he wanted to know what was going on in the minds and hearts of the people that he was about to preach to. And so just looking at the few pages of a newspaper would be able to give him a sense of what was actually going on in the hearts of an entire nation. He would see where they'd be disconnected or what they'd be hungry for more or what they definitely need more of. He would find a way and then morph his preaching around that so that they'd be able to take Krishna more readily. And that, I think, that's ultimate dovetailing. It's so smart and intelligent.
Does anybody have a comment, devotees?
Hare Krishna, I just have one more comment. When you said the parrot, when you were talking about the birds,
Female parrot. Yeah.
female parrot. I had a female parrot. Her name was Princess, and she let's see, in 2003 we got her. 2004 I met Adi, and she started chanting the Hare Krishna. She was chanting Hare Krishna. I got her to chant Hare Krishna, RVC. I don't know if you know RVC, the priest of the Bhakti Center, was whatever. Sorry, go. Yeah, he was feeding her prashadam. It was beautiful. So she won't take birth in that body again. But I don't know. I forgot what my point was. Sorry.
I actually have always wanted a parrot. I feel like, you know, if you look through like all of the awesome gopis and they have their kunjas, and even Radharani has several parrots. Like I feel like all the best people have parrots. So I always kind of thought, like, I was like, I want a parrot, but I'm not sure if I have parrot vet money. And I wanted to make sure that the parrot would be well cared for. But, you know, it seems like such a beautiful idea. You have a little parrot, you feed it little maha pomegranate seeds, you teach it to say Radha Govinda. It's like, you know, that parrot life. But actually, yeah, the parrots are the nicer ones. The ones that she calls out, like the big guns, it's this old female monkey. And it's described in like Govinda Lilamrita and all of these other like obscure scriptures. She's like wrinkly and her face is kind of sagging. She's old and she kind of ambles in and she doesn't move very quickly, but she has the most incredible screeching sound that she's able to wake up the divine couple, which just kind of goes to show that anyone can sing at Mangalarti. I feel like you ever been at a Mangalarti and like, oh, this is an austerity. But there's a purpose. Krishna has a purpose for everybody. And it doesn't just say, oh, that's it, you can't serve, or you're just a parrot, you can't serve, or you're an old lady monkey and everything is like sagging and wrinkled and strange. No, he makes an exalted position for this monkey who has a name that I forget, but just goes to show that everybody becomes immortalized by their devotional service.
Wow. You know, I started to get upset with Krishna when I lost Princess. No, I lost Princess because Maya. Actually, I'm sorry. Her name was Myra. So I met Myra, and I shouldn't have said her name. Anyway, I was thinking of Maya. Anyway, we got married to Maya, and I was just so upset because after marrying her, she told me to get rid of the parrot because the parrot was bringing demons in the house. And she convinced me. I loved her. So I said, okay, I'm gonna get rid of the parrot. And it hurt me so much. I was crying all the way to the park. The cage was like 4 feet. It was big, 4 feet, 5 feet big, and we had all the food under the cage and everything. And I gave her up. I couldn't stop crying. And I didn't know who Maya was at the time. And I'm losing my point. So then I realized, you know, Krishna, the energy, right? Maya. So there's a reason. There was a reason for this to happen, you know. And I was hurt. Yes, I was hurt. But Krishna was allowing this hurt for me to go through so that I can enjoy something better. To understand the peace, the love. Anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that pets get a bad rap within like Krishna consciousness sometimes. But Krishna has such an astounding variety of pets of all kinds. He's got 2 parrots himself. One's named is Vichakshana. And he takes this parrot with him from Vrindavan to Mathura to Dwarka. Like he keeps this parrot. He takes it with him and the parrot plays like vital roles in his pastimes. But he has so many pets. And I feel like we can think that, like I said, somebody might not have a role in our Krishna consciousness, or that might be association that is not necessary. But sometimes I do feel like it's the people association that gets us. But the animal jiva association sometimes is a little bit more conducive to our spiritual lives. So we have to remember that these animals are not ordinary, just like these people are not ordinary. And I am hoping that Princess, even if she becomes another parrot. This is a parrot in Vrinda Devi's army. They say Vrinda Devi has thousands, hundreds of thousands of parrots, and she knows every single one, and she commands them all to bring messages back and forth about Radha Krishna and what they're doing every day so that she can make arrangements. Like this, I always felt like was the origin of Twitter, right? Nobody has a bigger Twitter network than Vrinda Devi. So Vrinda Devi would employ all of these parrots. You tell me, where are they? Now where are they? Well, what are they doing? Well, what's Krishna doing? What's Radharani doing? How can we make them meet up? And then they would carry messages to and from the divine couple. And this would bring joy to the hearts of Radha Krishna. Something so simple. You think, just a parrot, all they do is repeat. What understanding could they possibly have? But this is the best understanding. Shukadev Goswami was Radharani's very own parrot. This is the best understanding that we could have. What better than to just parrot what our great acharyas are saying? What better nectar than to just kind of try and repeat the wonderful glories and the wonderful teachings and the wonderful uplifting content that our spiritual acharyas have given to us. If I could just be, just a little parrot.
Wherever that parrot goes, she's chanting Hare Krishna, and whoever's hearing it is benefiting, right?
That's right.
There's a story in the Upanishads about a devotee who was breaking the regulatory principles in meat eating, and then was forced to take birth after death. Yamaraj said, "You must take birth 2,000 times in the form of a cow for every hair on the cow's body, because you were participating in animal slaughter." So the next birth, he took birth in as a bull, and his master was Mr. Tongue, because he couldn't control his tongue, so he became the slave of this Mr. Tongue. Mr. Tongue was so cruel. He would beat the bull and work the bull so hard that the bull actually collapsed one day, just completely exhausted, and was dying by the side of the road. Mr. Tongue left him there. So these two guys came along, and they were looking at this. This poor bull was leaving his body, and he said, "This poor soul, he has taken the birth of a cow and a bull, and now we probably have to do it again. And we wish we had some pious activities to give to him." And then this little girl, 12 years old, she heard them, and she said, she was crying because the two men walked away. She said, if I have any pious activities, I give it to you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you have to take birth. And then he went to Yamaraj, and Yamaraj said, "Oh, you're supposed to take 2,000 times and for every hair on the body. But somebody gave pious activities. Your karma is wiped away. You get human birth." You know that story? You heard that before?
Yeah. There are there are so many stories that happen like that. And this Ekadashi specifically is an Ekadashi glory that happens like that. King can't have a son, the wife can't have a son. They go and they perform so many pious deeds, and they still nothing. But it is until the entire city fasts for Ekadashi, and then they offer all of those pious merits that the king's able to get the son. And so, yeah.
The story about the bull has a parrot in it, because the bull, that soul, he took a human birth, and then he remembered. And when he was 8 years old, he was thinking, I was a bull. And I had this, and he went and he found the bull's body, the bones by the side of the road. And then he said, and that girl, there was a girl, and she said, "I give my pious activities." He said, "What pious activities could she possibly have performed?" Mm-hmm. And so she said her mother was a prostitute. So he went to a local brothel, and he found that girl, who was now 20 years old. And he said to her, you said to me, "I give you my pious activities." What? She said, "I don't know. I don't know. I've never done any service. I never gave a donation. I never did any, pious activities. The only thing I can think of was there was a sailor, and he stole a parrot from a brahmachari ashram, and he gave it to my mother in payment for his engagement with her. And then the parrot, apparently, he would always chant, he quoted one verse from Bhagavad Gita. And because she heard that verse, she didn't even understand it. That was her pious activity that she gave, and it erased so the power of the scripture. How wonderful is Krishna? We got to throw that in there. How wonderful is Krishna, right? That he allows you know, even though we've done terrible things, that just by hearing from the scripture, we become purified and uplifted, and it counteracts. And we can even give it to somebody else. We can put
And it never diminishes, because what happens is that girl still is liberated. Like, it
yeah.
doesn't even matter. Whatever activities happen, the girl gets liberated, the prostitute gets liberated, the cow gets liberated. Everybody's, just by one verse of Sri Bhagavad Gita
The
recited by.
parrot. Yeah, go on, Acyuta Gopi. I just said that the
No, that
parrot
was it.
also gets liberated by vibrating the verse.
Yeah, the Gita Mahatmya is so full of stories where somebody says, it's like, well, what did you do? Well, what happened? Well, I heard a parrot, and the parrot's reciting this one chapter. And I kept hearing this parrot reciting this one chapter. I don't know what it was, but I heard it. There's the Gita Mahatmya is so full of stories with parrots who have been fortunate enough to have heard from sages and then just repeated. So even if you think, I'm not so great at telling stories, all I can really do is kind of remember and repeat what I heard from somebody else. It's enough. It's enough for you and the entire world.
Yeah, just one quick point. It's actually relishable and enjoyable, and it's extremely funny when a devotee who can't really sing by material standards, but they still put themselves out there and still chant, what do you call it, Mangalarati, the prayers in the morning. It's so sweet when a devotee like that, or a quiet devotee, gives class or something like that. When it's an act of surrender, and it's enjoyable, it's inspiring to see. Just wanted to say that.
Hare
All right.
Krishna, Glory to Prabhupada. We have to go now. Hare Krishna, Glory to Prabhupada.
Okay. Thank you, Acyuta Gopi, Devi Prabhu, for this wonderful movie. Let's protect the cows and let's protect the parrots. Let's add that there. Thank you, Acyuta Gopi. There's always some kind of pet involved in your class. It was a calamity puppy once, and now it's a parrot.
No, we're gonna go
Unbelievable.
back to puppies next time.
Nice, great. And thanks everyone for contributing to this class, either by listening or making a comment or reflection. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Ekadasi. Don't forget Krishna. Screech like a parrot, glorifying the Lord and his devotees, and you're going to be all right. Thank you very much. Acyuta Gopi Prabhu, thank you. Amazing class. Thank you.